Mike Sorraille, it's so good having you on. I'm really excited to hear about this 777 expedition that you guys have going on. 7 continents, 7 skydives, 7 days, specifically Antarctica. Like, what was that like? Jumping out of a plane above the South Pole?
Well, dude, you've got to be fortunate that you're even on Antarctica. I think it's less than 1% of the world. I think it's far less than that actually gets the opportunity to go there. So we got to spend about 7 days before we did our jump, and we actually got a practice jump in, but we had to time it with when the 757 that was coming back in to pick us up. We wanted to time it so that the clock started as close to when that was wheels down, we get on and leave. But we got to do some exploring. The camp we stayed at was like, a lot of people had a B next to their name, like they were billionaires. So everyone was like ultra rich. They loved to drink. The accommodations were nice. I mean, we weren't roughing it like Shackleton whatsoever. It was pretty awesome. Now the jump was awesome, but
so you didn't have to put an ad out into the newspaper asking for strong men doing daring expeditions to get people on board with this one.
No, not at all. We thought that was going to be the prime jump, and it was freaking awesome. I mean, we saw Mount Vincent from the air, but it ended up not being the best jump. Egypt by far, the entire group was like, yeah, that was freaking amazing over the pyramids.
I can only imagine how beautiful that is. My parents got to do a quick trip to Antarctica. They're finally hitting that age where they're like, we're going to go do all the things that we've been wanting to do for a long time. So they left out of Chile on a boat. They got to do the polar bear plunge off the water there. They did a quick skin ski trip up. Like, it was a lot of work for a mediocre ski run, but it was just cool being down there on a place where so few people have been. I've heard it's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. I mean, the air, the smell and and taking in the air says it all. I mean, it's just untouched.
And so what was the order of the jumps you guys did? Was that the first one just to make sure that it all lined up and you didn't have any hiccups, or where was that in the order?
Dude, again, you're thinking, tactically here. Yeah, that's exactly why we did it, because it was the wildest variable. We were told, hey, you could have 14 days of no jumping. So that's where we wanted, because we could always dictate when the first jump of the 777 was. So that's why we chose Antarctica. Believe it or not, Kevin, good dude, another SEAL, tried to do this a month after we did, and they failed. And their route was
Antarctica, or all 7 of them?
All 7. And good dude, their route was wrong. So what this ultimately came down to is it wasn't a tactical operation. It's the old phrase, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. That's what it was. None of the jumps were complex, maybe for me because I suck at skydiving, but it was a logistical puzzle that had to be put together of what was the minimal amount of time that we actually had butts in aircraft seats, so that I had more contingency time if I ran into scenarios. And we ran into a scenario that was not on our contingency list. We couldn't have guessed it. Antarctica, Chile, Miami, Barcelona, Egypt, Abu Dhabi, and then Perth. And we did it in 6 days, 6 hours, and 6 minutes. Now, mind you, we set 4 world records. People have been trying to do this for decades. I mean, from a Muslim crown prince with more money in a private jet, and they failed. Again, the SEAL after us, good dude who failed. There's so many people that have tried this and failed. It took us 18 months to plan and to continually look at the route and if we were doing it right. But it was just taking that, like, the special operations, like planning, mission preparation and planning cycle, and that's all we applied. So everything I had done in special operations enabled me to come up with that plan and set us up for success. Now, I will say this, it destroyed my life. Like, my companies started to suffer because I basically told my partners, hey, you got it, run it. And I had to focus on this for 18 months, and I'm still wore out, dude. Follow on. We have the documentary that's coming out in theaters, and just I haven't recovered yet. So there's got There's got to be a point in which I just take a month off. Plus, I got a baby coming in September.
Oh, congrats!
Heck
yeah, congrats!
I know, 46, dude. I'm going to be
still
65. I'm going to be 65 at its graduation, or her graduation. I'm going to be the dude. They're like, is that grandfather?
Don't worry about it. Kelly Slater's 52, and his girlfriend, wife, she just got pregnant. So you're in good company. Extreme people doing extreme things, bringing kids on late. It's all good.
You can't put me in the category of the GOAT. Like, I can't be in the category. Kelly Slater, dude. He won a world championship at 50. So, here's Kelly Slater. You can't even see where I'm down here.
That was a remarkable win, too. It wasn't even the finals. It was like the semifinals where he caught literally that last second wave, barreled through, popped out the other side. And everyone's just like, I mean, it's fucking Kelly Slater. Like, what else could you expect? It was an amazing scene to watch happen, but you're just like, yeah, I mean, what else would happen? Obviously, Kelly Slater is going to get a last second wave that he gets barreled. And it pops out the other side with a perfect 10 right. Yeah, sure.
Not surprising.
But now you're in the same category as him because you're having kids late.
Yeah,
he's doing it later than you.
Yeah.
He's still breaking world records. So there's that too.
Yeah.
What were the 4 world records?
So somebody did 6 continents. They did 6 continents in 8 days in like 7 hours and 14 minutes. We ended up breaking that one in like 4 days, I forget, in like 10 hours and something minutes. So we set the first 2 world records there, one for, individual sport skydiving, and then also the tandem record. So we had a tandem pair on every jump. And then when we got to Perth, we set, again, 2 records, the individual sport skydiving record for 7 continents, which no one had ever done, and then the tandem pair as well. And let me say this, there are a number of reasons. The company that I formed is called Legacy Expeditions in honor of our fallen. And it's meant to get retired guys or former special operators together to feel that brotherhood again. And you did. And then there's also the sorority drama that comes with our kin. But we jump in honor of our fallen, and on each continent, and is detailed in the documentary, we're telling the story of one of our fallen members that somebody jumped in honor of on that continent, and raising money for Folds of Honor. But man, with the recruiting issue right now, I want SOCOM to get involved. We could turn out documentaries with even active duty guys who are not in critical roles where their faces can be seen, and just show the caliber of guys and women in special operations, and just tell these amazing stories to motivate the kids like we got motivated from watching the movies or reading books about Vietnam to do what we did. And we need it right now more than ever.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I know it's a huge topic in politics, in the media, just how much the DoD is shit in the bed right now with its recruiting numbers. And it's not necessarily the DoD, it's each of the branches is having its own issue, except for our alma mater, the Marine Corps, the original one. What is the Marine Corps doing that's so different from the others that they're able to keep hitting their numbers?
Here's my perspective, and Greg, I'd be interested in yours. One, I think you got to look at society. We are going through moral confusion and social deviancy. This whole Israel Hamas thing, and especially what's going on as we're filming this, all these protests where they're screaming death to Jews. Dude, that doesn't align with American values. And Hamas definitely doesn't align with American values. And additionally, people just don't have faith in government anymore, which, dude, I'm a small government guy. We've seen, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's people don't want to serve for this government because they have no faith in this administration in particular. But dude, if I had a crack at this, one, if you look at veteran entrepreneurship, and I know you guys know this well, I think it was 49% of all World War II vets that came home started their own businesses. If the last statistic I saw is veteran entrepreneurship is 4%. So why don't we do this? You know how we deployed overseas and we had tax-free active duty pay? Why didn't you make all military pay, regardless of where you're stationed or if you're in a combat zone, tax-free, so that the quality of life goes up. And then additionally, based on how many years somebody served, one, make their retirement or their income non-taxable for a period of time. But more importantly, to spur on veteran entrepreneurship, make all business income for veteran businesses tax-free for a minimum of 7 years to get them past that 5-year mark where 99% of businesses go out of business. Give them the opportunity to get through the hardship, because most of them are starting late in their 30s or 40s, starting businesses where the other people graduate from college and they get a head start. I guarantee more people would enlist, because we don't want to lose the all-volunteer force. We all know the stories of the draftee military and the leadership challenges that came from that.
Yeah, there was a congressman whose chief of staff I somehow got connected with on LinkedIn, Matt something. But the congressman he works with is trying to push along a bill that would allow veterans to transfer their GI Bill benefits. So instead of taking school, like a lot of guys, either they already have their bachelor's or there's like, I don't need to go to school. Especially seeing what's going on with a lot of the schools these days, they're like, I don't need to be a part of that. That's not going to help me run a business. Is allowing veterans to take, I don't know if they standardize to say, here's the average of what a GI Bill pays out over its lifetime. The government's just going to give you that as a loan, a business loan that will forgive. And I think that would really jumpstart a lot of business, because having 150, 200K all of a sudden in your account, and I'm sure you can have some ways to vet it, treat it like the SBA, make sure that there's a business plan in place, that there's a sound idea, and the logistical stuff's in place, so you're not just passing guys 200K. But just giving them a forgivable loan for them to start businesses, I think that'll be a huge benefit. And it just allows guys to have a different option other than just going to school.
You're going to get no complaints from me.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to the idea of where the other services are falling short, what are they doing, and what do you suggest
they're not putting on their scopes backwards? That's for sure. In their promotional photos.
I feel bad.
For fuck's sake.
That's what the SF community doesn't know, that if you do that, actually you become more. No, I'm joking. Yeah, that was pretty.
Makes the picture smaller so you can see.
Yeah, careful what you say on your mic. There's some people listening that are going to take that and going to be like, "Oh, I got to put my sight on backwards." Okay, sweet. That's what the SF guys are doing. Sweet.
And I've actually seen some SEALs do that. I'm not kidding, but
we're special.
Funny enough,
we're special operations.
Tim Kennedy shot me a note when the SF won the combat diver competition, and they beat the SEALs out. And I'm like, oh, hey, take it with a grain of salt. It was also SF set up that competition. They probably knew what events were coming up, but he's not wrong. And Kevin, I can't speak for you, but like I did zero combat diving during my time in the SEALs because we were so land-based with Afghanistan and Iraq.
Absolutely none.
Hey guys, I'm going to switch us over to, this is going to be a little pause that I'll clear out here. I'm going to switch us over to low data mode because I'm getting a lot of, Kevin, I can't even see you. So it'll just be us talking. So try to look pretty because you won't be able to see your face.
Cool.
Got it.
I'm going to mark it. So we have 13:55. Okay.
Yeah, mine completely cleared out too. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. You can still see yourself, right?
I can.
Okay.
No, I cannot, but that's all right. I don't need to see myself any more than I already do.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I think the most important part is we can all hear each other better now.
Yeah. Yeah. So other than that poor ship commander who was just Blue Falcon by his armor, putting that scope on backwards. I mean, I'm sure that guy was just popping up there. It's like, I haven't shot this thing since, OCS or something like that. I'll hop up there and take a few promo photos. And he's just blasting rounds off. You can see 2 pieces of brass in there. So he's obviously going full cyclic mode on whatever it is they're shooting at. But yeah, it definitely goes up there with things that you should not do when you're having recruiting challenges?
You gotta keep in mind too, that guy could go to the helm and press a button and fire like 10 cruise missiles that take out an entire city. So he's like, yeah, that's a cool little weapon. Watch this.
Hold my beer.
Yeah. He's like, that's cute.
Yeah. So with your documentary stuff, how do you see you being able to promote recruitment? What type of scenarios, what type of lifestyle would you show happens in the military to try to attract this younger generation, which has just become so desensitized and separated from service and country? They're getting indoctrinated. I don't know if indoctrinated is the right word, but they're getting inundated with counter-American, anti-American sentiments left and right. They're probably confused as hell of what they should actually believe. Where could you step in and provide some support?
Well, one, I would say it's cool to be an American, and you truly begin to understand that. And Greg and Kevin, I know you know this, when you go to third world countries to see how good we have it and that freedom isn't free. There are well over 1 million Americans that have given their lives to lay the foundation for America to be what it is. And we should be proud of that and grateful. But I think, and I look back to the reasons I joined, is I met a Force Recon Marine, probably weighed 135, 140 pounds. And the guy was just impressive in every right, kind, respectful, empathetic, didn't need to prove he was a tough guy. And I'm like, bro, whatever organization you're a part of, like, I want in. And that's the very guy who, when college was not working out for me, helped me to enlist on a recon guarantee to try out for recon. As these kids look, one, there is love of country, but even if you don't have that, there's adventure. And there was a large part of wanting to do cool things, do hard things, to see if I was cut out. I think it's a very intrinsic human question that when you watch something like Black Hawk Down, you're like, one, do I have the mettle to do what those guys did in that scenario, to keep on fighting injured or when one of my brothers is wounded, and to do the right thing under fire, to have the courage, both physical and moral. But I mean, you also are part of a brotherhood or a sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, if you're a man or a woman. And, in today's society, very few people feel homecoming and belonging. I felt that to the highest degree, and I'll never feel it again like I did in the military. And it was fun just to be surrounded by my brothers, even in the worst of combat situations, knowing that as bad as it was, together we were going to get through this one way or the other. And that sense of homecoming and belonging, to be part of a tribe, dude, I've never felt that since I've retired the way I did when I was in.
And with you going from Marines to SEALs, like I haven't talked to many people who have done the same route that I did. Mine was a little bit less intentional than yours. You obviously wanted to go directly into the Marine Corps. You went recon, and then shifted over later in your career to the SEAL community. How did that come about for you? For me, went Naval Academy. Unfortunately, didn't get SEALs out of there. I was at the height of the global war on terror. Graduated in 2008, and so there was just a ton of badass dudes going through in my class that ended up getting SEALs ahead of me. And with Marine Corps, it was honestly a huge eye-opening experience and great opportunity for me to see a service that I really hadn't even considered. But how did your story go about going from recon? I assume you wanted to get to a different part of the fight, and then you transferred over. How'd that go about for you?
So when it comes down to it, it was ego. Became a Recon Marine, became a Scout-Sniper, and then when I'm in the fleet, we do things with SEALs, and like when they walked in the room, much like SF guys, like everyone would stop and be like ooh and ah. And I do remember this sounds so stupid at bars, like you're like with women, you're like, yeah, I'm a Recon Marine. They're like, what's that? And And the response would be, well, it's like a Navy SEAL, but it's not. And they were statistically older, more highly educated. They were part of SOCOM. The Marines were not. They had the funding. They had the better weapons. I mean, I was a Recon Marine sniper still carrying a M16A2, and they had the M4s with all the bells and whistles on them. And also people used to say, hey, well, SOCOM guys go through some of the world's, toughest training. And don't get me wrong, there were studs in the recon community, and there were like parts of recon assessment and selection that I thought were harder than buds, especially like their run times and everything were much harder or higher standards. But as the war kicked off, a lot of my force recon buddies and recon buddies were like, yeah, SOCOM, SF guys, SEALs, AFSOC are all at the front, the vanguard, and we're not being utilized in the same way. And I went to Marine OCS and I started to do the math. Okay, so I can go to TBS and then go, IOC if I'm lucky, or in that same amount of time, go to BUDS and then get to the war at the front quicker. And it was an easy decision, a little disloyal to the Marine Corps because they had funded my education while being on active duty pay. But, the military is going to get their pound of flesh one way or the other. So that's what led to the decision.
Did you have a lot of kickback from the people in your chain of command?
Oh, dude. So I had a prior enlisted Marine officer who was at the university I was stationed at. And I went to him, and this is after OCS. I'm like, hey, man, I want to go SEALs. And he's like, dude, do what you want to do. And he actually used that term. The military is going to get their pound of flesh one way or the other. Make sure they get their pound while you're doing what you want to do. But he's like, hey, just be prepared because we got to go to the colonel now and let him know you're putting an inter-service transfer in. And he called me disloyal and some other names I won't repeat. And I walked out of there, and the major, the Mustang, is like, dude, don't worry about it. Just stay the course. And actually the colonel, funny enough, because I'm an active duty Marine, then moved me from all the other active duty Marines at that university and put me in with all the midshipmen to like embarrass me. And I just had to endure that last year. I doubled up on credits to get out of there as quickly as possible. I did, and everything just, it worked out for me.
Yeah, it's so funny how the Marine Corps does stuff like that. Like I actually had a very, I'll say pleasant as far as it can be experience as I was doing my transfer from the Marine Corps to the Navy, where they were rather supportive of me trying to get to the fight. I was coming from a comm background, so they weren't able, as a community, to offer me the same type of stuff I was looking for anyway. So I think they understood that. But I was talking to friends who were infantry Marines trying to go to MARSOC, so still staying within the Marine Corps, but just trying to get to the soft route. And even they were ridiculed and chastised and told that they're disloyal to the conventional infantry side. They're like, there's no special Marines. Every Marine is special, or no Marine is special, whatever it is they said. But it's just interesting how people take it so personal, the trajectory you want to take with your career, when it doesn't affect them at all. But for some reason, they see you leaving as a slight against them and the service that they represent.
So if you trace that back, that statement that there are no special Marines, it was actually the Commandant Al Gray. And I forget what year it was. It was like 84 to 86 when the Marine Corps received an invitation to be part of SOCOM. And he said those exact words: there are no special Marines. Every Marine is a rifleman. Understand the signal he's trying to send, but if you break it down, how unprofessional and stupid that statement is. If I have 100 Marines in front of me, that traditional bell curve, I can rank them from best Marine to worst Marine. Not all Marines are equal. Not all SEALs are equal. Not all talent is equal. If you want to look at the power principle and use the SEALs or Greg, the SF community, use the power principle or Pareto's principle. Power's law, the 80-20 rule. That 80% of your results are driven by 20% of the SF community, if that's what we're looking at. That there are elite within the Special Forces community, and there's other guys that I call the bottom feeders that still provide some value but are not the top performers. So when leaders say that, it's like saying that the concept of fairness, which I disagree with, is a guiding principle within an organization. This is like how we get into the DE and I crap.
Yeah, I like to tell people it's just DIE, just call it die. Just go where businesses go to die. But I can be the first to tell you, not every Marine is a rifleman. Some of them would be lucky to hit the broadside of a barn. And honestly, there's probably some SEALs that aren't a whole lot better, even though we get thousands of rounds a year to go through. It's not some people's strong suit. They carry other skills and abilities that we don't have. But to claim every Marine is a rifleman is a bit of a stretch. And you mentioned the talent stuff going on, and I know you work in the talent space. You left the military. You did executive search and leadership development. What would have been the most impactful skill sets? 'Cause I know you worked with a lot of veterans, getting them placed in some pretty senior leadership roles. What has been the traditional spot, or that's traditional, the traditional skill sets and experiences that carry the most value to organizations that have so little connection with the military?
Yeah. So let me say this: we focus on small to medium-sized businesses. That's where we found, which are traditionally smaller than corporations. It has more of a small team feel. So that's where we felt it was sort of a non-empirical theory. That's where veterans would fit in most, with smaller teams. But operationally, we found that the right veterans, and I got to say that the right people, operationally, they can step into a company and just help streamline process, procedures, systems, bring a little bit of accountability and discipline to organizations. And the theory, for the most part, has worked out. And we've had a lot of the people, the CEOs or owners that we place these veterans into, call, and they're like, dude, game changer. Within like 30 days, game changer. And take things off the CEO's plate that they just don't want to deal with anymore. And the business side, the P&L, that is a weakness for veterans, but it's something we can pick up very rapidly. Once you teach them that, and the fact that you've got to look at that daily, if not every Friday, to make, let's say, financially educated decisions based off what's working and what's not, and managing expenses. The right vets have done a very, very good job with that. But, if you want to get into the attributes, dude, the right veteran is just unflappable. Like, when everyone else is losing their minds during volatility or ambiguity, for us, it's just like shoulder shrug. And we're like, okay, yeah, it's just a bad time right now. Let's just affect what we can, start moving in a direction. It may not be the right direction. We'll course correct if it's not, but they're just unflappable. And I think during COVID, it really showed that, as businesses and the people within those businesses that had not faced the austere environments and situations that we did were just losing their minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell people all the time that the most beneficial, most impactful experience that I got out of going through SEAL training, the tactical stuff is fine. I'm sure I can make some segues of how learning how to fast drop out of a helicopter, and you learn coordination and teamwork and training and stuff like that. But really, the most beneficial thing that I learned was just having that perspective shift of, this is what hard actually is. And this is what a challenging situation is. And now everything downstream of that is significantly easier and more manageable, because I've already been through these shitty experiences, these painful experiences, these trying moments where, like, I legitimately want to quit right now. And so now other things that happen, you're like, well, it wasn't as bad as this. At least I'm not getting surf tortured. At least I'm not having to firemen carry a 200-pound person with all their gear across the El Centro Death Valley area, like we did out at Nyland during land warfare. Or to the full extreme side, nobody's shooting at me. There's no explosions going off. So you can have that much more calm peace of mind as you're working through problems, and you can say, there's a solution here we can find. There's no reason to get stressed out about it.
And funny enough, two things here, Kevin. One, I think the strongest thing about our guys coming out of the soft community is mindset. And if you ask me what's one of the biggest missing elements of organizations, it's mindset, which organizational mindset is the foundation for culture. But here's another one. We've been in business for 5 years, and this is going to feed Greg's ego, and he'll probably come back with some arrogant comment. But we have placed way more SF guys into companies than I have SEALs, MARSOC, or AFSOC guys.
Goddamn right. That's goddamn right.
Yeah, there you go. We've just struck gold with the SF guys, and I can't provide you a reason why. But operationally, they've come into small businesses and just succeeded. And we had one guy go in as a VP, and within 3 months, he was a COO of the company.
I think that goes back to, our mission is so focused on train, advise, and assist. So operationally, I think we just fit in very well in a small business environment right off the bat, because that's literally what we do. That's our bread and butter. And so we've been trained to do that from the very get-go, where I know that's part of your guys' mission too, as well, but it's probably not as emphasized as it is in the SF community.
It's relationships and integrating into different cultures as quickly as possible. 100%.
Yeah.
And Greg, I actually got the opportunity for, 3 or 4 months, lived in Southern Pines out of the Marriott, but I was a guest instructor at Phase 2, small unit training, I believe it was called, in which I got to follow them as well as then go look at SFAS and all the other aspects of the SF qualification course, and was totally blown away by how the SF and actually the talent war. I got some nasty comments from SEALs because the book starts out about special forces and the horse soldiers, and actually takes more vignettes from the SF community than the SEALs, because the SF community had codified what they were looking for based off the whole man concept. Like, hey, if somebody has a majority of these attributes in the bullseye, the likelihood is they're going to make a great, Army Special Forces soldier. And for us at the SEALs at that point, it had been a historical, just sort of precedent sent down of here are the evolutions. And if the guy has the mental toughness to make it out the back end, he's most likely going to be a great SEAL. And we went and looked at what the SF community did. And this is years ago, starting in like 2010, started to codify what specifically we're looking for through the Basic Underwater Demolition School process, what attributes and things like that. So no, that's why I've been a fan of the SF community, and arguably you guys were the godfathers of special operations in the U.S. because you were formed first based off the just stellar vision of JFK and future small conflicts.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I was, because I read your book, I think it was like right when I started recruiting, and I tried to pitch this to the company that I was working with. I was like, this is fucking it. Like, this is how like companies need to be built. And they were like, get fucked, basically is exactly what they told me when I told them, like, this is how we need to like assess candidates. They're like, no, we're not, that's not going to happen. So I imagine that you've gotten quite a bit of kickback from organizations. So what is that? And I know I don't want to go too far into recruiting because we already talked about how we don't really, but anyways. But I mean, how do you overcome those conversations?
We haven't gotten that much bad feedback. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, and that book like really created a niche and really has a strong following. And everyone says like, this is what we want to do. But then when we come in-house, they're like, yeah, it's too much change too quickly. And we're not saying in the book we talk about experience, which is not necessarily an indicator for future performance. And the reason we say that is if you show me a SEAL E8 or a SF E8, who let's just say is not the top performer, they have experience. But if you go back and look at who their coaches and mentors were, who they learned under, it becomes no surprise why they're a low performer when they reach the senior enlisted advisor level. So, if I can get somebody who's humble, hungry, and smart, and is trainable and has effective intelligence, not necessarily a high IQ, but is just driven. And we all know it's so much better to have to pull somebody back than to push somebody forward. When you have to push somebody forward every single time, I just wear out. I'm like, hey, dude, this is not a cultural fit. I'm not questioning your character or anything. You're just not a fit. I need you to be more aggressive and involved in your professional development. But everyone just will always default to experience. And we've placed people who contacted us, we've placed veterans coming out, and you're talking like former soft guys who they fall in love with. And they're like, oh, this guy's amazing, but we're going to go with this other guy who wasn't a veteran, but has like 8 years of experience in industry. And I'm not kidding you. My co-author and I, who were working together at the time in Talent War Group, would get a call and they're like, yeah, this guy, within 3 weeks, this guy's toxic that we hired, who has industry experience. And we're like, well, what are you going to do about it? And literally, it's almost like verbatim. They're like, well, we're going to keep him in place because if I fire him, my boss is going to look at me like, hey, what are you doing down there? And it's frustrating. And there's a lot of stigmas around veterans. And guys, this is why we're doing these documentaries. One, to feel that brotherhood again, while telling the stories of our fallen, who were flawed individuals, just like you and I, but we're just amazing individuals in redefined selflessness. Like, this nation needs to be more selfless. It's not about you. I always say that to my wife. It's not about me. It's about us. And if I can do something to put us in a better position, and if that requires my life, then that's what I'm going to do. But it's also redefining what the public thinks of special operations and military members, that, their perceptions are shaped by Platoon, by Oliver Stone, which just like plays to the lowest common denominator of what veterans were. No, the warriors I served with were kind. They were empathetic. They were respectful, emotionally intelligent, high in intellectual horsepower. Yeah, there were some loud ones. That's just their genuine, authentic personalities. Mm-hmm. But it's not what the movie depicts, and it pisses me off. And then the second thing is this they're like, oh, poor veterans, you're broken. We're like, wait, if a society that is arguably in disrepair and broken itself is calling us broken, then thank you. We're not broken. War, and I steal a quote from Andy Stumpf, war leaves a fingerprint on you that just can never be washed off. And yes, arguably war breaks you mentally, physically, and spiritually to some degree. But just because you're broken doesn't mean you can't rise from the ashes. And that does take some time for different individuals based on their just who they are and the path they need to take. But those experiences make us, again, I use that word, unflappable. And in really getting the public to see what these men are like, especially our fallen, is the whole goal here. And I come from San Francisco, the Bay Area. And like, I loved growing up there. I love the Bay Area. I live now in Texas. But if you ask anyone in San Francisco to name one soldier that was killed in Iraq or Afghanistan, you won't get an answer. And then they just have this negative view of military, playing to the lowest common denominator. I mean, that's why they removed ROTCs from all the high schools in San Francisco. So I'm not going to sit down and allow the public to think that we're just some guys who couldn't, graduate high school and had no other choice but to enlist in the military. Kevin, you're an outlier because you went to the academy.
I'm weird. Well, I honestly didn't know the difference. Like even the difference between officer and enlisted. It's military people. I wanted to be a SEAL. My cousin, he was about 9-10 years older than me. His best friend was a SEAL. They went through boot camp together, rescue swimmer together, and then his friend's like, I'm going to go off to try being a SEAL, and he went and did that. He didn't have much of a family life, so he was always around. And I met him when I was like 12 years old, and it would just seem like the coolest job you can possibly have. Hearing the stories of what he did, and so from a super young age, I was laser focused. This is what I want to do, and I was told about the option of Naval Academy. You get your college paid for. That sounds awesome. I don't want to pay for school, and it just seemed like an easy route to get there. I didn't know that. Well, I knew you could go straight out of school or out of high school, but it seemed like might as well just stack on all these other cool qualifications to make myself more more valuable. I didn't realize that it was a completely separate track of the special operations community to go officer versus enlisted, and that in the middle of a time of war, spending 4 years at school versus going out and doing the job that I wanted to do. Looking back, would I do it again? I don't know. I'm a big fan of believing that if you change one thing, you have to take the wholesale change. You know, everything I did to get where I am today was all a contributing factor. But yeah, the officer route was very different than I expected. Looking back, I wish I'd been more educated on what the options actually were. But, you know, it gave me the perspective of, you know, pushing through, because it took me forever to get to the SEALs. As I said, I wanted it from when I was 12 years old, and I finally went through BUDS when I was 27, because I went to the Naval Academy. That was 4 years. Actually, it took me a year to even get to the Academy. I didn't get in right away. And then I didn't get into SEALs from the Academy, so I went 4 years in the Marine Corps. And then I had to go through Hell Week twice because I got swimmer-induced pulmonary edema. And so, like, my whole life has just been obstacles and delays and issues getting where I want to be. It was honestly harder for me to even get into BUDS than it was for me to make it through. And so I think that really plays into who I am today. Of I had this goal of what I wanted to do, and no matter how many obstacles and detours I had to make along the way, I still was laser focused on what that end state wanted to be. And I think that's a very powerful mindset to have, and a lot of veterans have that similar thing. As they go through their military career, they know what they want to be doing, and they need to be working diligently towards it constantly.
Dude, I have the utmost respect for guys that went to service academies. And funny enough, I went back and talked to the junior officer training course. And there was a whole bunch of West Pointers that went straight out of West Point into BUDS, as well as the Air Force Academy. But, dude, I don't think the Academy would have been a right program for me. One, I wasn't smart enough to get in. And I know academically that is challenging, but dude, there's one SEAL I remember in particular that came out of the Academy. Oh, such a good dude named John G. That's all I'll say. And that guy partied like he was trying to make up for 4 years. Like he missed out at the Academy.
True.
And there was
there's a lot of guys that do that.
There was like he would go out to the bars during nights at BUDS, and I'm like, "Are you in?" Of course, I was older when I went through BUDS. I'm like, "Are you freaking insane?" And he would show up. He would leave the bars at 2, show up at 5, and perform better than I could. But exceptional. I mean, the Academy, Naval Academy, owns the SEAL community for the most part, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, some of the most exceptional officers, Admiral Howard, Mitch Bradley, the list goes on. We're all Academy graduates, and I was grateful and humbled that I got to do an understudy underneath them.
Yeah, the Academy does do one thing really well, and I think BUDS on the enlisted side is starting to adopt some of those factors where when you go to the Academy, you're there for 4 years, and you're surrounded. You find your cliques of people, you find your little tribes, and you find all the guys that want to go SEALs, and you're constantly hanging out with them. You're talking with them. You're hearing stories of the guys that are 4 years ahead of you. You're hearing stories back from them about what BUDS was like, and when they make it through Hell Week, and what it's like in the teams. And so you're just fed information for 4 years, and you're hanging out with the group of people. You're building that mindset, so that when you finally go to BUDS, whether it's 4 years later, or for me, another 4 years beyond that, you're armed with so much information that it becomes a significantly less daunting task. And I can speak for that in even the microcosm side of going through first phase, making it through Wednesday of Hell Week, and then getting rolled for SIPE and having to start over again on Monday. Yes, it was completely demoralizing to be like, man, I'm back at square one. I thought I was done with log PT. Literally, it was right after the last log PT of Hell Week. I was like, I'm finally done. And then I get rolled and I have to go through all of them again. But knowing that I made it to that point and understanding, what the schedule kind of looks like, what the battle rhythm is, what it is that you're doing there, what the instructors look for, what a strong BUD/S candidate versus a weak candidate looks like, and just knowing that you made it to that point, that you can probably do it again, it makes any task significantly easier. Fear is just it's unknown information, and you don't know how it's going to come out. And so that's really how the academy grads do so well, is we're just surrounded by this information and this network of people that you walk into it armed with knowledge and anecdotal experience.
Yeah, I'm sure there's it's an unsaid sort of outcome that if you're from the academy and you go to BUD/S and you fail, you are like on the PNG list, because I know
sure.
it's hard to compete for those billets. And I think that's, dude, the percentage of Naval Academy officers that drop out of BUD/S is, I think it's got to be one of the lowest of all demographics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely that fear of ostracizing or being ostracized from the group. Because I know for a fact there's guys that quit, and you don't hear from them again. Either they're embarrassed, guys don't want to hear from them anymore because they look at them as a quitter. It sucks because it's not for everybody. But yeah, I think there is that mentality of, you took this opportunity away from somebody else, and now you're not deserving of recognition. It's a dog eat dog world out there in the soft community.
But just to pull Greg into this, I heard this from somebody who said basically the SF assessment selection is basically like a gentleman's course compared to BUD/S, because we all know that deep inside every Green Beret is just a little boy who wants to be a Navy SEAL.
Oh man. I actually did SEAL Fit training up for SFAS, and it got me into good shape for sure. With his name's Sarraille, and he just passed away. Kevin, we were talking about him the other day. Do you remember what I'm talking about? They might have called him Taco.
Taco? Yeah.
Dan Sarraille. Yeah. He was
he had
great
like a
guy
heart
up in
attack out in the
Washington.
woods with his son or something like that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And Dan was not in the best of shape.
No, he definitely wasn't.
It's too bad. But going through and actually getting to go watch Rob and Sage, I'll say one of the differentiations from the SF community versus the SEALs is, dude, you guys have to develop patience. I mean, there was that. I mean, when you're dealing with indigenous forces, you better be high in patience and tolerance, because that can be a infuriating environment. And again, that may be a differentiator why people from the SF community get out and tend to, in my anecdotal experience, tend to do better in business, because they've developed that patience.
Robin Sage is easily the coolest. I mean, it's got to be one of the coolest courses in the military in my eyes.
Can you talk about what Robin Sage is for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, so Robin Sage is the culminating exercise for the SF qualification course, and essentially what it is, it's a made up country called Pineland, and you are going in there as a U.S. Operational Detachment Alpha, or Special Forces Operation Detachment Alpha, and going in and embedding with a indigenous force, and it's mocked up like all throughout North Carolina. It's like throughout the entire state of North Carolina. So you infill, you meet up with your guerrilla force, and then you just train beside them and encounter like tons of different scenarios, like how to go and operate inside of a black market, and how to set up a ghost team for medicine. So getting like a ghost doctor, and basically creating like your own medical system underground. So it's just a really neat opportunity, really, really cool experience. And they've obviously got it down to a science at this point. It's a blast. It's a whole lot of fun.
What I found interesting, Kevin, and Greg can speak to it better. So, deep within SF history in Vietnam, one of the indigenous forces they used in Vietnam was a sect of people called the Montagnards.
Yep.
And a good portion of them left Vietnam and settled in North Carolina because of their relationship with the SF community. And during one of the scenarios of Robin Sage, they've got one of the traditional mountain yard huts, which is, on stilts, big building, and the Robin Sage students, candidates, come in and have to, collaborate with them to convince them to conduct an attack. And just watching that history and all these people that, were second generation because they didn't fight with SF, but their parents did. And then, immigrated to the U.S. to get out of Vietnam out of fear of being annihilated by North Vietnam. That was rich in history and absolutely impressive.
Yeah, that is. I didn't even. Did not speak to that for sure. I mean, that was one of the coolest parts. That we definitely had Montyards on our lane, and it is cool. I mean, they don't obviously talk about their own experiences during the actual practice or during the actual training scenario. But afterwards you get to talk with them, and it's definitely rich in history, and it's cool to get that perspective also, and having to navigate some of the same ethical, probably same ethical dilemmas that they had to back in Vietnam too. I mean, it all comes full circle, and it's rooted in that in the Vietnam War for sure.
Yeah, I think that really ties into what you were talking about earlier, Mike, that to be in the SF community, to be successful in that community, you really need to have high EQ, simply based off of the mission profile of what they're doing. They're going in with 12 guys and working with a partner force of several hundred. And so immediately you're having to leverage small pools of talent across a larger audience. You need to interact, and you need to build rapport, and you need to have relationships and understand what your skill sets are. And everybody has their lanes. Obviously there's some overlap, but that's why they have 18 alphas, 18 bravas, 18 charlies. Everybody has their specific skill set that they bring to the table, and now they share that knowledge. Where the SEAL community, because we don't have a larger parent force that we can operate within, like SF, there's a filter. You have straight leg infantry, you have Rangers, you have SF, you have Delta, and everything is a ground combat oriented force, and they all speak the same language for the most part. Where the Navy, it's super fragmented. You have like the submarine people, you have the ship people, you have the airplane people, you have this small group of people, with 2,500 of us, the SEALs, where we don't really fit into any other subsect of the Navy. Like, yes, we'll ride on ships, we'll ride on submarines every once in a while, but we're not part of that force, and they don't support us other than in logistical movement. And so we operate very independently. And so a lot of the stuff that we do is we just create it amongst ourselves, and there's not a whole lot of knowledge. Well, just like that knowledge sharing. We don't share operational tips and tricks with the submarines because it's irrelevant. Where SF, they have a broader cross collaboration capability, where infantry speaks a very similar language to Rangers, speaks a very similar language to Delta, or not Delta, SF, and so they have a lot of their stuff codified and systematized. Where SEALs, we're terrible at knowledge management. We basically make shit up every time we do it, but it gives us a huge amount of creativity and freedom in what we do, which is why we can be so dynamic and flexible. Where the SF community, it has such a strong foundation of what they do and what they train to, and it's consistent across the board. And Greg, I'm sure you can speak to that a little bit more than I can.
Yeah, I wish, and this is just like, obviously because you just said this, I wish that there was more cross organizational training, like there's more guys like Mike, more opportunities where you were showing up to small unit tactics and being able to shadow that course and help out there. And like our dive team should like 100% like always be working with you guys. I wish there was more opportunities like that where we were working alongside each other.
One of the things is the inter-service rivalry, which is just, it's immature. Anyway, you got it.
It's brotherly love.
It's just like, it's the 20-year-old game of like, well, Recon Marines are better. No, SEALs are better. No, Green Beret. they're all like ice cream, just slightly different flavors because of their unique mission set. But no, Greg, you're right. And Kevin, to your point on like the independence, that actually was a huge weakness at the start of the war. And we had to catch up quickly because if you're Hispanic and you come to America and only speak Spanish, like you've got to learn English. So we basically had to learn joint very rapidly, and we did, and we sped up to the requirements of war, and we got pretty good. But I mean, like I said, I was the junior officer training course director at BUDS, which is the JOTC as we call it, so that when a SEAL officer graduates, I basically have them for 1 month to turn them into a somewhat capable ground force commander. And one of the things we did was we actually brought a 7th group guy over, permanent billet at BUDS. His name was Jose, SF officer, to start teaching the soft conventional integration, which was big in the war back then. We started to get better, and it's okay to just say, "Hey guys, this isn't a strength. Can you help us with this?" And when you start collaborating, and I'm saying something very obvious, when you start collaborating and training those TTPs and best practices, everyone wins. At the end of the day, we're all on the same side. But if you look at the war, actually, the direct action raids were, let's just say it, they were fun, and SF was doing that in groves as well with their proxy forces. But the way to win these wars was through foreign internal defense. And I even resisted that because I just didn't want to work with proxy forces. It sucks. But if we truly wanted to have great outcomes of that war, it was going to take decades, not 2 decades. It was probably going to take like 5 to 6 decades, and we didn't prepare the American public for that. But it was building the Iraqis and the Afghanis to be able to defend their own nations. And arguably, I think the outcomes have shown we failed.
Yeah. But I mean, you probably came into the SEAL community with a very unique skill set because it was right at the start of the war, but you had started in the Marine Corps, which speaks doctrine impeccably. Like, talking about coming to America and speaking Spanish, like they came to America already speaking fluent English, and so taking that recon knowledge, that sniper platoon knowledge, and carrying it over to the SEAL teams, I imagine you were a very sought after source of knowledge and capability planning capability as the SEALs were ramping up their processes to get into the war.
It was. I'll say it was a strength that set me apart from the other ensigns. In similar to what's taught in SFQC, the Marines were doing a lot of 96-hour mission planning cycles. I remember doing operation orders that on ruled paper that were 60 pages long, and like building sand or what do you call it, terrain models that were just elaborate. And in doing that mission planning style, that 96-hour mission planning and preparation cycle. But then, the war was very much time-sensitive targets. So transitioning that to be quicker wasn't that hard to do. But then at JSOC, you got back into that 96-hour sort of mission planning cycle just due to the intricacy of some of those operations. And that was an education in itself. And very fortunate.
And obviously, that's why you were so successful in accomplishing the 777 expedition. You've gone from Marine Corps planning, you've gone from SEAL planning, you've gone from wartime snap operation. Like, hey, this target just popped. We need to plan this out in the next 4 or 5 hours, and having the mindset to look through problems and potential problems and contingencies and all the logistical aspects that go into it, working with a lot of the stuff that we're doing in other countries. We have ISR assets overhead, so, like Predator drones. We had helicopters and gunships protecting us and dropping us off. We had fixed wing aircraft overhead. You had friendly units operating nearby that you need to know about. You had partner forces that you're on scene with. You have artillery and other fires platforms that you're having to coordinate with, and it's just layering things on top of one another. That I'm sure once you were just like, all right, we just need to get a couple people on our aircraft to these different countries, just plan a route and make sure the logistically sounds good. I imagine that was significantly easier, and it was easy for you to comprehend all these levels where these other guys probably hadn't planned more than 3 or 4 levels deep before.
And I think that was the key to our success. Armed to be successful, it still required a ton of work, but without that background, I wouldn't have been able to pull that off. And I think that's why so many people have failed. Yeah.
And when is that documentary coming out?
In theaters, well, the premieres are May 11th in New York City, May 13th, which we're giving away a number of tickets to SOCOM, like 200 tickets. So Tampa, May 13th, Austin, May 14th, Dallas, May 15th, and then LA, May 16th. And then it'll run in select theaters from May 31st to July 4th. And people have given, I mean, even the guy who started IMDb, Cole Needham, watched it, and he's like, this was a lovely film. Adventure, banter, tears, laughter. So it's a good film, but you guys are built the same way. You finish something, and you're like, yeah, I could have done this better. I wish we had more budget to actually go to the homes of the family and hear their depiction of their loved ones. We could have done a better job. That said, we did something exceptional that we're proud of, but we just need to partner with the right production studio where we can tell these stories. And somebody said something genius. You guys have seen Band of Brothers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just an awesome flick. And if you watch Masters of the Air, same thing. It actually made me appreciate being on the ground rather than the air. But could you imagine if Band of Brothers was done in the 1960s when these guys were in their 40s, and how society would have looked at them differently, and all the soldiers that even weren't part of the first of the 506, but their families, their societies. Like, I don't want to wait to tell the story of our fallen until I'm 70 or 80. So I think society needs to see the example that these men set. And it may just help solve some of these reindeer games that are going on within our society today. And the fact that we just don't put the right priorities forward as we're in disrepair as a society.
It's a super important aspect of having society, recover, I guess, maybe. It's service members. As we've come out of war, but regardless of how you feel, how it ended, we are essentially at an end point with that stuff. We're not deploying as many people. We're not having that high op tempo. And so society needs to be able to reabsorb these veterans, and veterans need to assimilate back into it. And so the more people can understand what we went through, what we're trying to accomplish now that we're back home, there's the words being thrown around that we're broken or damaged or fragile. There are some of us that are, but for the most part, we're still very capable, determined, useful people that just want to go back to living life. And that's why so many veterans have this idea of wanting to get into entrepreneurship, because they want to have ownership. They want to contribute back to society more than just showing up to a job. No matter how much you pay us, we never joined the military for pay. Any of us can attest to that. And so we want to be able to be contributing functional members of society. And so the more we can educate society and show our value, I think it'll really help people get back into the next chapter of their life.
Not only that, but we are a group of individuals that want to serve other people. I think we've proven that we are a selfless bunch, and so if you're the type of organization that wants a person like that someone that's yearning for purpose after their military service and wanting to serve others and help others, like you got to hire from the veteran community, like because you're going to get those types of people in droves, and the veteran community itself is struggling to find those organizations. So yeah, it's it's the perfect time to be bringing veterans into the fold.
The entrepreneurship piece is, plus veterans just want to own their own outcomes. But dude, I'll tell you what, I'm a centrist. I watch how some of our leaders in the National Capital Region act with no civility and professionalism whatsoever. And I watch how our military leaders, both enlisted and officers, act. And it's night and day, dude. I would never do it, but we need more veterans on school boards, on city councils, on sheriffs, in elected offices, more in Congress and Senate, to act with some decorum and knock this bullshit off. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're blue or red or sit in the center, same flag, dude, same flag. And I would never get into politics, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but we do need more veterans stepping up and taking these roles. And I know that's sort of a cop-out, but
I strongly feel the same way. That I was talking about this with Kevin the other day. It's like going the politician route is like, it is quite literally my worst nightmare. And I would never in a million years wish that upon anyone. But like, if there was any person that needs to be in exactly for the reason that you just stated, Mike, there needs to be more. I think of like all the officers, like just any of the officers that I worked with, even the bad ones in the SF community, would just be such an awesome choice for politics.
You say that. I was talking with one of the senior guys at Fox, and I've always been impressed with Fox News about just like when you walk into Fox News, like it is actually a great experience versus the other networks I go to. And one of the guys said, yeah, even our bad is at a higher level than the bad of the other networks. And you just said it, like even the guys who are not the best, SF soldiers or SEALs still operate at a high level that others can't attain.
Yeah. And they
there's something
put in the efforts, they had to at least get to a certain baseline of capability and skills and perseverance that, we're hard on our own because we expect perfection to some level. But yeah, anywhere in the world, they would do remarkably well at all levels. And I tell people all the time, stop getting so involved with national level politics. If you can't list off who your mayor is and who your state representatives are, don't worry at all about who's going in for president, who's in the Senate. Local politics is so important for making sure things are, your life is much more enjoyable. You mentioned school board stuff, like school boards, mayors, city council members, sheriffs. Those all have a significantly higher impact on your quality of life day to day than anybody sitting out at Washington.
Yeah. Lead where you're at, affect change where you're at, and then grow from there.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you mentioned that there was a snafu before you hop off here. What was the you said there was an issue on the jumps. What was the biggest issue?
So when we took a red eye from Chile to Miami, we landed in Miami at around 6 a.m. and guys were already feeling the sleep deprivation. So when we turned our phones on when we landed, it was just like bloop, 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 all the alerts coming that the NOTAMs system, which regulates air traffic control in the United States, was shut down for the first time since 9/11. And like, that's the contingency. I'm like, well, we did plan for like airflow problems, but if this flight was delayed, we could hop on another flight. All flights were canceled. And so we were faced with two things. One, we still had to knock the jump out in Florida for North America. And two, how the hell are we going to get to Barcelona and stay on track? And we had one Canadian, a JTF2 guy, and we pulled everyone in. And this is the power of the brain trust or dynamic subordination, which we know so well within the special operations community, that people will fluctuate between leader and follower regardless of rank based off knowledge or expertise. We pulled the guys in and said, hey, here's the problem. And I was honest. I'm like, I don't have the faintest idea on how to solve this. And we had a woman that was coordinating all air traffic. She's with American Airlines, which was planning all the flights. And her on the phone, she's basically said, we're fucked. And so I pulled the guys in, the JTF2 guy's like, hey, well, he does have the Canadian accent. We called him the lone Canadian. Said, why don't we get a private aircraft? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, except we don't have the money to do that. And he's like, well, let me make some phone calls. So everyone got on the phone, and we got enough good Americans to put in for a private jet. And that's the one leg we flew private, which was the worst flight of my life that I can remember. It was a G5, but we did get to Barcelona. We actually stayed on track, and we set the 4 world records. But that's the power of the brain trust. And just because you may have the title leader doesn't mean you need to come up with the idea or execute that idea. You can always rely on the power and the intellect of the aggregate group. And that's what happened.
Hell yeah.
Love it.
That's awesome.
Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. I know that you have a bunch of stuff out there. You have the original book, The Talent War, How Special Ops Wins on Talent, a book from last year that just came out, Everyday Warrior, the No Hack Practical Approach to Life. And you also have a Men's Journal article that follows that same theme. And you have the children's book that's coming out soon that's building off of your experiences in the military, and how to raise strong, productive, good children in society. So you've obviously picked up the author bug. You have your speaking engagement. You have the 777 expedition coming out next month. I'm trying to remember what month it is right now. So you have a ton going on. If people want to check your stuff out, you're all over social media as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. And I'm looking forward to seeing this documentary when it comes out.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Greg. Just to summarize what I think we learned here is that Navy SEALs are better than Green Berets, and I'll just leave it.
I'm going to let you have the final word on this one, Mike.
I'm joking.
Podcast title.
Yeah.
No need. No, man. Greg, Kevin, I appreciate it, man. Respect you both.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you, man.
All right, guys.